It's been 9 years since Nintendo unveiled the Nintendo Switch that has changed the video game industry. With its hybrid concept of a home console and handheld combined together into a console that we can play at home or take it with us on the go. And now with the Switch 2 released last year and priced around $450 during initial launch. But due to external factors such as tariffs, AI RAM pricing, it now costs at around $500. While the console and its family of lineups will not be discontinued for some time, it's inevitable that it will eventually be phased out on global markets to pivot focus on the Switch 2. In Europe, the Switch 1 will be phased out in February 2027 due to battery regulations. So how does this stack up after 9 years? And is it still worth buying a Switch? So let's start things off with the tablet. This is the core part of the console that runs all of the exclusives and third-party games. So here's the tablet itself. There's the headphone jack, USB-C port, and a game card slot that you can insert your games with, and also the display. Oh, by the way, the display is touchscreenable. I bet you guys didn't know about it, huh? So about the Joy-Cons, it's one of the core parts and main selling point of the whole console. You take out the tablet and then slap the Joy-Con on both sides of it, and there you go, you got yourself a handheld console. It also comes with a grip that you can connect the Joy-Con with while playing on the dock mode to provide better comfort. The Joy-Con comes with a different color. Mine comes with black color as that's what it comes with at the time, though there are other colors including red and blue, pastel purple and green, pink and yellow, neon purple and orange, and more. There's also special editions including Legend of Zelda, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Fortnite, and more. But the biggest thing that the Joy-Con is well known for is the stick drift. In fact, it got its nickname Joy-Con Drift. You see, the Joy-Cons uses potentiometer joysticks. It's a mechanical input device that uses two variable resistors to track physical movement. It's a common type of joysticks used in game controllers like the DualSense and Xbox controllers. Now remember, this was the time when Hall effect and TMR sticks aren't a thing before the early 2020s. Over time, the constant contact of the physical sticks will wear out the resistors, causing the sticks to get drifted. It got so out of hand that Nintendo was slapped with numerous lawsuits and even a 35 million euro fine for Nintendo in Europe over claims of misleading consumer. Though from my unit, my Joy-Cons is a bit sensitive while turning the joystick. Sometimes it moves itself while my joystick is stationary. But it didn't warrant any Joy-Con replacement since it doesn't really affect my gaming experience. But I did add a pair of 3D printed controllers locks from a seller just to prevent the dust coming in and make sure these joysticks won't move itself while in the bag. Now, let's talk about the gaming performance. The performance on the Nintendo Switch is a heavily debated topic even after its initial launch. The console uses a processor called NVIDIA Tegra X1. And yes, it's that NVIDIA. It's an ARM processor released back in 2015 and has already featured on some devices such as Tesla and Audi infotainment systems, NVIDIA Shield Android TV, and Google Pixel C. So Nintendo actually used two separate versions of the Tegra X1s. The Tegra T 2010 is featured on the Nintendo Switch V1. It runs on 4 2.2 GHz Cortex-A57 performance cores and 4 1.3 GHz Cortex-A53 efficiency cores. On the other hand, the Tegra T2010B01 is an improved X1 chip released back in 2019. It only runs on 4 2.1 GHz Cortex-A57 performance cores and is used on Switch V2, Lite, and OLED models. Now I know it sounds like wizardry numbers, but in short, you get better performance and efficiency on current hardware models than earlier versions, though it still performs roughly the same. But while the Tegra X1 seemed impressive as it can run games like Super Mario Odyssey on a decent frame rate, you have to understand that Nintendo Switch was released 2 years ahead of the chip and it was considered technologically outdated by analysts, game journalists, and developers during its initial launch. So to emphasize this, let's use Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as an example. Yes, it's a relatively new game, but it should at least set some examples of hardware limitation on the device. On handheld, the performance was actually not that bad. Sure, there were some frame drops on occasions, but most of the time it runs decent. It might not be 60 FPS most of the time, but at least it isn't drastic enough to drop the game altogether. Docked mode though, wow, it is really rough. To clarify, the game still runs at acceptable performance levels, just that in some key areas it can chug a lot. Some graphical settings like draw distance was tuned a bit low. It might have upset it for some performance gains, but it does bring some annoyances like Pokemon spawning right in front of you when you're riding on Koraidon or Miraidon. Oh, and don't forget about graphical glitches and bugs. To be fair, the game was running on the Switch 1 and the console was already in its 5th year of the life cycle at the time. Obviously, bad optimization from the developers does play a role in this disaster, but most of the performance issues were largely resolved with the Switch 2. While the console is already lagging behind in raw graphical power, it doesn't mean that it is already obsolete. Take Breath of the Wild for example. It's an old game, but it is a large open world game where you can explore vast regions. So in theory, the open worldness of the game will tax the console with large amount of processing power, and the console will likely to chug in performance. In fact, the Wii U version of the game does chug a lot with noticeable performance drops at the native resolutions. But when it was launched, it actually runs perfectly fine. Yes, there were a couple of sacrifices made, like utilizing a scaled down Wii U build, dynamic scaling resolutions, locking the frame rate to 30 FPS, sometimes dropped to 20s, and it ran at 900p while docked and 720p on handheld. But even then, it was perfectly optimized for the Switch. Gee, I wonder what happened to optimization these days. Plus, that doesn't stop developers to somehow create miracle ports for the Switch. The best example of this is Hogwarts Legacy. Now remember, Hogwarts Legacy is not a cloud version like the Resident Evil Village. It is a full fat port running natively on the Switch, but it does require a lot of sacrifices in order to run the game properly. Notably, downscaling resolution from 720p to lower resolutions, reduced textures, lower draw distances, simpler models, and opting for zone areas. When you are playing massive titles for hours in docked mode, having a great comfort matters a lot, which brings me to the Pro Controller. The Pro Controller is an optional accessory if you don't want to use the controller grade provider to play on docked mode. Ergonomic wise, it's actually quite comfortable. On the build quality side, it uses a durable type of plastic materials. It has your standard potentiometer sticks, a D-pad, BAXY, left and right shoulder buttons and triggers. Unfortunately, the sticks has been drifted. Well, the left stick to be specific, and sometimes. So I ended up using my 8-bit Do Ultimate 2 Honkai Star Rail Edition for the Nintendo Switch. Now, to be clear, the controller is not compatible with the Switch as it doesn't support natively and is intended for the PC and Android phones. So I had to rely on this 8-bit Do wireless adapter to connect it with the dock and use Bluetooth. Now back to the question, is it still worth buying the Nintendo Switch? Well, there are a few factors that you should consider before you step out and buy the console. The first thing that you need to know is that the Switch is almost at the end of its product life cycle. Like I said, this console is 9 years old, and the Nintendo Switch 2, which is the upgraded and better version of the Nintendo Switch, although it is more expensive than the OLED model, the Switch 2 will receive more game library and support for another 7 to 8 years. Plus, you can just play Switch games on the Switch 2 since it is backwards compatible. There is also another way to maintain longevity and access games on the Switch after the console's end of life cycle, albeit it might be a bit illegal. Assuming you had an unpatched V1 models, then there is a possibility that you could mod the Switch with custom firmware. This is because the earlier versions of the Switch had a hardware vulnerability that can be exploited through software. But if you had later versions of the Switch, you can still technically mod it, but you will need
the greatest technician that's ever lived
type of skills, as the only way to mod is to solder a mod chip to the motherboard. Now I won't tell you how to mod your Switch, nor am I condoning piracy because A. Nintendo will probably send a hitman on me, B. I have no experience with modding, so I am not in a position to guide you on how to mod your Switch. The only reason I wouldn't recommend modding your Switch, especially when the servers are not at their end, is that there is a risk that your console will be banned, which permanently restricts your access to online service or accessing eShop. And if you don't have
the greatest technician that's ever lived
skills to solder your mod chip, doing it improperly and it will break your Switch and also void your warranty. But if you are willing to go through the hoops, then modding your Switch is still a good choice for preservation. Nintendo Switch is perhaps one of Nintendo's most important game console of all time. After the commercial disaster of Wii U and underwhelming sales of the 3DS, the Nintendo Switch helped turn the tide for the company and revitalizing it as one of the biggest players in the gaming industry. Despite the console is already reaching its limits and the release of Nintendo Switch 2, it will be remembered for its cultural significance and how its concept triggered the idea of bridging the gap between home console and handheld. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Nintendo Switch? Are you still looking to buy one, or are you looking to buy the Switch 2 instead? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.